A little girl placed her worn-out stuffed rabbit on a chair and whispered, "Is this seat taken?" No one knew that this question would open the door to hope, to a surgery that would save her life, and to a family reborn. If stories of healing, second chances, and the quiet power of love speak to your heart, please consider subscribing so you won't miss the rest of this journey. The morning drizzle swept across Seattle's Pike Place Market, soft and gray, the kind of rain that blurred the edges of neon signs and made the cobblestone streets glisten as if polished by grief itself. Andrew Carter, 38 years old, sat at a corner table of the cafe that overlooked the market. He nursed a cup of dark roast he barely tasted. His tailored coat and umbrella, folded neatly at his side, made him look like the picture of control. But control was only the mask he had mastered since his wife's passing 3 years ago. He often came to Pike Place on days when the boardroom victories meant little, when the hum of servers in his company's glass headquarters on South Lake Union echoed emptily. Here, in the scent of fish and flowers, life felt raw enough to match the hollow space inside him. That morning, he noticed a woman and child slipping in from the rain. The woman, young, perhaps 27, had dark hair pulled into a messy bun and wore a diner uniform beneath a threadbare coat. She clutched a tray of paper cups, distributing them to other workers who had taken shelter before their shifts. Beside her was a little girl in a faded pink raincoat, holding a stuffed rabbit so loved its ears drooped unevenly. The child scanned the crowded cafe. All the seats were taken except one, directly across from Andrew. She hesitated, hugging the rabbit close, then stepped forward with the courage only children could summon. "Is this seat taken?" Her voice was gentle. A whisper that cut through the clatter of cups and murmurs of strangers. Andrew looked up. For a moment, the child's wide hazel eyes reminded him of his late wife's younger photographs, eyes bright with questions, not yet dimmed by loss. Before he could answer, the woman rushed forward. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said quickly, touching the girl's shoulder. "Ava, sweetheart, don't bother the gentleman." But the girl, Ava, had already begun climbing onto the chair. In that instant, Andrew noticed it. Her body wavered, her balance unsteady, as if the world had tilted beneath her. Her small hands gripped the edge of the table, and the stuffed rabbit slipped from her grasp. Without thinking, Andrew leaned forward and caught her arm. "Easy," he said softly. "You almost had a fall." Ava blinked up at him, embarrassed but smiling. "Sometimes my feet don't listen." The words pierced him. A subtle phrase, yet behind it Andrew recognized something more than clumsiness. Years ago, when his wife was ill, he had sat through countless medical consultations. He remembered terms like gait imbalance, the warning signs neurologists described when pressure inside the skull interfered with balance. The mother, cheeks flushed, guided Ava onto the chair and muttered, "She just gets tired. Long shifts for both of us." Andrew didn't press. But as Ava tucked her rabbit beside her and leaned forward as if she belonged at his table, he felt the quiet insistence of fate. "Thank you for letting me sit," Ava said, her words formal, as though she were negotiating a treaty rather than borrowing a chair. Andrew smiled despite himself. "You're welcome. What's your rabbit's name?" "Mr. Buttons." She lifted the toy, its stitched eyes nearly loose. "He's been with me since forever." The mother shook her head. "We're sorry again. She talks too much." "Not at all," Andrew said, meeting the woman's weary gaze. He saw the fatigue etched into her features, the under-eye shadows of sleepless nights. A waitress, he guessed, juggling work and parenting alone. He knew that kind of exhaustion, the kind that wasn't physical alone but carried grief and worry heavier than bricks. Rain hammered the windows. The cafe felt warmer, but only at that small table did Andrew notice the transformation of his morning. Ava swung her legs under the chair. Suddenly, her expression tightened. She pressed a hand to her temple and winced. "Mommy, my head hurts again." Andrew's pulse quickened. Morning headache. That phrase again from neurology lectures he had once overheard, an early sign of raised intracranial pressure. He said nothing, but his eyes flicked instinctively to the mother. The woman, Lily, as the barista greeted her, touched Ava's back. "It's the weather. Too much rain makes her dizzy." But Andrew saw it differently. The moment replayed in his mind, the imbalance, the near fall, now the headache. These were not coincidences. "Here," Andrew murmured, loosening the scarf from his neck and wrapping it around Ava's shoulders. She leaned into its warmth. "Keep it. The morning's colder than it looks." Lily protested. But Ava beamed, the scarf far too big around her small frame. "Thank you, mister." Andrew Carter, a man who owned glass towers in downtown Seattle, who signed deals with firms in Tokyo and Berlin, realized with unsettling clarity that this tiny stranger had just unsettled the architecture of his carefully managed solitude. The table that had always felt like a fortress now became something else. A bridge. He watched Ava nibble on a croissant her mother had brought, each bite small, deliberate, as if she understood food couldn't be wasted. He noticed the faint tremor in her left hand when she lifted the cup of warm milk. He noticed everything, and he knew he would not be able to walk away unchanged. Outside, Pike Place buzzed with its usual chaos. Vendors shouting, tourists snapping photographs of flying fish, street musicians strumming guitars under awnings. But at this table, time slowed. Andrew thought about his wife's last words. "Don't live in rooms too empty." The empty chair across from him was no longer empty. As the drizzle thickened into rain, Ava leaned forward and whispered again, almost conspiratorial, "This seat is taken. By me." Andrew Carter felt something in his chest shift. A warmth, fragile but insistent, began to stir. He didn't yet know that this small girl's headaches were the whispers of a tumor pressing against her young brain. He didn't yet know that his wealth, his grief, his very purpose would be tested in ways neither boardrooms nor fortunes could prepare him for. But he knew this. The seat across from him was no longer just a chair. It was the beginning, and the coffee in front of him, still steaming, no longer tasted bitter. The rain had thickened into a cold, needling curtain by the time Andrew reached the curb outside Pike Place. He saw Lily half carrying, half guiding Ava under a plastic poncho that had lost its sheen years ago. The little girl's pink raincoat clung to her like damp paper. When they paused at the corner, Ava closed her eyes and swallowed, as if fending off a wave. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Lily asked, bending to meet her daughter's face. "My head," Ava whispered. "It's loud." Andrew's throat tightened. "If you'll let me," he said to Lily, keeping his voice careful, "I can drive you. Seattle Children's is 15 minutes north. If it's nothing, we'll know. If it's something, sooner is better." Lily hesitated, the kind of hesitation born from years of needing to solve problems alone. Then another shiver ran through Ava, and the decision was made for her. "Okay," Lily said. "Thank you." They moved quickly. Andrew's sedan, always spotless, now felt like a lifeboat. Ava, buckled in the back seat with Mr. Buttons, watched the wipers soared through rain. Halfway up I-5, she retched into a paper bag Lily held ready, the motion violent and sudden, morning vomiting. Andrew's mind stitched the clues together, each one a stitch he wished he didn't know how to make. At Seattle Children's Hospital, the emergency department was a flood of colors and hushed urgency. Fish painted on walls, the smell of antiseptic, an intake desk that had seen too many parents learn new words for fear. A triage nurse ushered them to a small bay with cheerful decals that failed to warm the space. "What brings you in today?" the nurse asked, gloves snapping as she checked a pulse ox. "Headaches," Lily said. "Mostly mornings, and she's been dizzy." The nurse's questions were efficient. Duration, frequency, severity, any vision changes, any falls. As Lily spoke, Ava stared at the ceiling tiles like they were a puzzle she needed to solve. A resident with gentle hands and precise eyes arrived. He introduced himself as Dr. Patel. After a basic neuro exam, finger to nose, a heel to shin, asking Ava to walk a few steps, he frowned slightly. "A touch of gait imbalance," he said, voice neutral. "And, Ava, can I take a quick look at your eyes?" He dimmed the lights and examined the back of her eyes with an ophthalmoscope. When the light clicked off, he spoke quietly to the nurse. "Papilledema," the word floated like a thunderhead, swelling of the optic disc, a sign that pressure inside the skull might be high. Dr. Patel turned to Lily. "Given the headaches, the morning vomiting, and what I'm seeing on exam, we should get an MRI of the brain with contrast. That means with gadolinium, as soon as possible. We'll also draw labs, start fluids, and keep her NPO, nothing by mouth, for now." "Is it bad?" Lily's voice was steady, but her fingers clenched Mr. Button's without noticing. "It's too early to say," Dr. Patel replied, "but we don't want to delay imaging." He glanced at Andrew, who stood a respectful step back. "Are you Dad?" Andrew held Lily's line of sight. She gave the smallest shake of her head, as if to say, "Not yet. Not anything we can survive explaining." "I'm a family friend," Andrew said softly. "Okay," Dr. Patel said, focusing on the patient again. "We'll get you moving quickly." Time changed its shape. Nurses moved like practiced choreography. Ava lay on the gurney, small under thin blankets, watching the sliding world of the ED. Andrew stepped out to give Lily privacy when the registrar approached. He heard the lowered voices, then the word insurance. "Medicaid application in process," Lily said. "We moved last month. My shifts changed. We'll flag financial counseling," the registrar replied, professional and kind. "And regardless, under EMTALA, she will receive emergency care. We'll handle the paperwork while she gets the MRI." Andrew caught Lily's eye when she stepped back. She'd heard the word that mattered. Care. He offered nothing more than a nod. The right kind of help, he'd already learned, is help that doesn't make someone feel smaller. The MRI suite was a colder universe. A technologist explained the machine, the sounds it would make, the brief IV for contrast. Ava gripped Mr. Button's, now wearing a tiny paper wristband that made Andrew want to break and promise everything at once. "You'll hear knocking," the technologist said. "Think of it like a robot playing drums." Ava nodded solemnly. "Robots don't get scared." The scans seemed to last a lifetime and a half. Lily stood as close as the techs allowed, palms pressed to the observation glass. Andrew stood beside her without speaking. The images bloomed in grayscale, slices of a secret the body had kept too long. A pediatric neuroradiologist joined, gray hair, quick mind. He scrolled through sequences, toggling windows. T1, T2, flare, axial, sagittal, coronal. When the gadolinium passed, a shape lit like an unwelcome constellation. He took a breath. "There's a posterior fossa mass," he said gently. "Likely pilocytic astrocytoma given the age and imaging characteristics. It sits in the midline and is compressing the fourth ventricle. There's early obstructive hydrocephalus. You can see the ventricular enlargement, and a mild midline shift." He pointed to the optic nerves. "The papilledema fits." Lily steadied herself on the counter. "A tumor. Often this type is benign, slow-growing and surgically resectable, the neuroradiologist said. But it's causing pressure and blocking the flow of CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. That's why she's vomiting in the morning and losing her balance. Dr. Patel returned with a pediatric neurosurgery fellow, Dr. Green. They reviewed the images again at a pace normal people could bear. Dr. Green spoke with the deliberate clarity of someone who knew words could bruise. The immediate question, he said, is pressure. If her exam worsens, we may need to place an EVD, an external ventricular drain, to relieve pressure quickly. The definitive treatment would be a suboccipital craniotomy to remove the tumor. We would aim for gross total resection, GTR, if it's safely possible. Removing the mass should reopen the CSF pathways. Will she be okay? Lily asked. Our goal is cure with surgery, Dr. Green said. Pilocytic astrocytomas in the posterior fossa often have excellent outcomes when fully resected. But we must discuss risks: bleeding, infection, injury to nearby structures like the brainstem and cranial nerves, and a post-operative condition called posterior fossa syndrome, temporary mutism or speech difficulty, coordination problems. We have a comprehensive team, PCU, PTOT, speech therapy, to support recovery. Andrew listened to the list like a man counting steps over a frozen lake. He had once measured risk in market caps and cloud uptime. This was a different translation of the word. What happens next? Lily asked, voice steadier now that there were verbs in the room. Place, monitor, operate, heal. We'll admit her, Dr. Green said. Start dexamethasone to reduce swelling. Monitor her in the ED a short while, then transfer upstairs. Surgery could be as soon as tomorrow, depending on bed availability and her exam. He paused. Our financial counseling team will meet you. There are options: Medicaid, CHIP, charity care, payment plans. The emergency care proceeds regardless. Lily's shoulders eased a fraction, then tensed again. I have old bills from urgent care visits for ear infections. I've fallen behind. We'll have the counselors bundle everything, Dr. Green said. Right now, your job is to be with your daughter. The moment cracked wide open when Ava emerged from the MRI room, blanket around her shoulders like a cape. She looked brave and very small. The nurse offered a sticker sheet. Ava chose a tiny silver star and pressed it onto Mr. Buttons's ear. Can I have water? She whispered. Not yet, Lily said, kneeling to meet her at eye level. Soon. They were assigned a bay while beds upstairs were prepared. Monitors beeped softly. A volunteer brought a book, and Andrew watched Lily read aloud, her voice steadying with each sentence. When the case manager arrived with a folder, financial counseling, charity care, Ronald McDonald House, Lily set the book down and stood to listen. We'll fast-track your Medicaid application, the counselor said. Because you've moved counties, there's a transition pause. We'll bridge it. There's a program to cover lodging if surgery moves forward and you need to stay close. Food vouchers, gas cards for travel, small things that add up. How much does surgery cost? Lily asked, more to face the shape of the thing than out of expectation she could pay it. The counselor's answer was careful. It's complicated. Facility fees, surgeon, anesthesia, imaging. PICU, but it is more than most families can handle alone. That's why the programs exist. Andrew kept still, feeling the pull in his chest to say, I will cover it. He sensed the steel in Lily's spine, the dignity that had kept her upright in storms he would never fully know. The right help would be the kind she chose. Ava drifted to sleep, mouth slightly open, breath a quiet metronome. Andrew stepped to the threshold, giving Lily space. Outside the curtain, he caught Dr. Patel again. If pressure spikes overnight? Andrew asked. We watch closely, Dr. Patel said. If her neurostatus declines, worsening headache, vomiting, drowsiness, We'll place the EVD emergently. Otherwise, we proceed to surgery with the neurosurgery attending." Andrew nodded. He wasn't family. He wasn't nothing either. He was the man at the table who had seen a child nearly fall and decided that staying was a form of love, too. When he returned, Lily was tucking the blanket closer around Ava. She looked up, eyes glassy with fatigue and a dawning kind of courage. "They'll try to schedule the surgery," she said. "They think it's operable. There are risks, but there's a path," Andrew finished. She nodded. "There's a path." He pulled the chair closer to the bed without scraping the floor. The coffee he'd bought downstairs was still warm. He didn't offer solutions. He offered presence. Across the room, a monitor hummed softly, a lighthouse tone in a night that would be long. Somewhere above them, an operating room waited, very bright and very clean, with people who had trained their hands to do impossible kindnesses. Andrew looked at Lily and then at the child who had asked if a seat was taken, and he knew with an iron certainty that his place was here, beside the problem, inside the fear, holding a corner of it so it weighed a little less on the person whose arms were already full. Outside, the rain kept time against the windows, as if the sky itself refused to look away. By late afternoon, the plan was set. Admit, steroids, close monitoring, consent for MRI-guided suboccipital craniotomy in the morning if stable. Emergency EVD if not. A path, yes, but one paved with numbers Lily could not pay and risks no one could fully predict. As the ED lights dimmed to evening mode, Lily exhaled at last. "I can't afford any of this," she said without apology, only truth. "But I can't afford not to do it." Andrew met her gaze. "Then we walk it, one step at a time." His words contained no promise of money, only the promise of not leaving. In that moment, it felt like the most valuable currency in the world. And somewhere deep within a child's skull, pressure whispered its urgency, a red flag waving until the right hands could take it down and fold it away. The walls of the social work office at Seattle Children's were painted with murals of sailboats and bright kites, as if optimism could be brushed on with latex paint. Yet inside, the chairs were hard plastic, and the folders stacked along the desk edges told stories of battles fought with insurance companies, of families trying to balance hope against debt. Lily Brooks sat upright, hands folded tightly around a clipboard of forms. Her uniform from the diner still smelled faintly of coffee and grease, a reminder that she had worked the night shift only hours before Ava's sudden collapse had brought them here. Her hair, pinned quickly, was already loosening, strands falling against her tired face. Across the desk, the hospital social worker, Ms. Harper, adjusted her glasses and tapped into the electronic chart. "So, Ms. Brooks, I see your daughter has been admitted under pediatric neurosurgery with a diagnosis of a posterior fossa mass." "They're moving toward surgery." "Yes," Lily answered, her voice steady but thin. "They said it's operable. They said benign. But the cost—" Ms. Harper gave a small nod. "That's what we're here to talk about." Andrew Carter sat beside them, silent but attentive. He hadn't intended to follow this far. Yet when Lily and Ava were moved upstairs after the MRI, he found his feet going where his heart had already decided. He knew better than to interfere, but he also knew enough about corporate ledgers to understand that medical bills could crush a single mother before the surgery even began. Ms. Harper scrolled through her screen. "It looks like you've applied for Medicaid CHIP, but the transfer between King County and your previous county hasn't cleared. That means there's a gap." "I moved apartments to be closer to work," Lily explained quickly. "My lease ended and I couldn't afford the old place. I submitted the address change. But then my shifts doubled and the paperwork—" "It's not uncommon," Ms. Harper said. "Unfortunately, until it processes, the system shows her as uninsured. That doesn't stop emergency care. Under EMTALA, The hospital must provide it, but it does complicate coverage for follow-up, rehabilitation, and any old balances you still carry. Lily swallowed. I have 2 unpaid urgent care visits from last year. Ear infections, both times. They sent them to collections. Andrew's instinct was to lean forward, to offer the simple solution he could provide with one wire transfer. But Lily's posture warned him. Shoulders squared, jaw set, the dignity of someone who had learned too often that charity came with chains. Ms. Harper slid a pamphlet across the desk. We'll start with financial counseling. The hospital has a charity care program. Income-based discounts, up to full coverage if you qualify. There are also grant programs for families with children facing neurosurgery, but paperwork will take time. Lily nodded, though her eyes were tired. Time is the one thing Ava doesn't have. Andrew finally spoke, measured. Is there any way to accelerate? To get a second opinion while you sort the paperwork? Ms. Harper glanced at him. Who are you to the family? Andrew caught Lily's glance again. She hesitated, but then said, He's a friend. Someone who wants to help. All right. Ms. Harper returned to her screen. Second opinions can be done remotely, depending on the hospital. Some families connect with NYU Langone or other centers. The challenge is transmitting the imaging and covering consult fees. I can help with logistics, Andrew offered carefully. Connections, not money in your hand. Just setting up the call. Lily's eyes softened, though pride still flickered in her. That I can accept. For Ava. That evening, in Lily's small apartment in South Lake Union, the rain tapped against cracked windows. The space was cramped. A pull-out couch, a kitchen table with 2 mismatched chairs, walls damp where the plaster had bubbled. A poster of sea turtles, Ava's favorite, was taped above the bed she shared with her mother. Andrew had never stepped into such a home. His world was glass towers, curated lobbies, art that cost more than this rent for a year. Yet here, surrounded by second-hand furniture, he felt something far more honest. Ava sat cross-legged on the couch, scarf still looped around her small shoulders, coloring with markers that barely worked. She looked up at Andrew. Do you like purple? She asked. Yes, he said. Good, she replied solemnly, because purple is brave. Andrew almost laughed, but his throat caught instead. Lily set 2 mugs of tea on the chipped table. I don't let her hear much about the bills, but she knows more than I want her to. She's observant, Andrew said. Too observant for 6. She's had to be. Lily sat across from him. Her father left before she was born. It's been just us. I don't want her to grow up thinking she's a burden. So I work. Nights. Double shifts. Do you have anyone to help? Family? My mother passed. My father's in Spokane, remarried, not interested in being a grandfather. Friends come and go. Mostly it's me. Andrew listened. He had money that could silence debt collectors, lawyers who could cut through insurance delays. But what Lily needed was someone to respect the walls she had built around her pride. The next morning, Andrew kept his promise. With his company's telehealth platform connections, he arranged a remote consultation with NYU Langone Pediatric Neurosurgery. The files were uploaded through secure transfer. MRI with contrast, radiology report, lab results. Lily sat beside Ava in a small conference room at the hospital while the screen flickered to life. A professor of neurosurgery in New York introduced himself. He reviewed the scans methodically, pointing out the enhancing mass in the posterior fossa, the obstructed 4th ventricle, the mild midline shift. Our impression aligns with Seattle's team, he said. This appears to be a pilocytic astrocytoma, benign but space-occupying. Surgical resection is recommended. You may hear discussions of gross total resection, GTR versus subtotal, depending on whether the tumor can be safely separated from the brainstem. Either way, prognosis is favorable. What about alternatives? Lily asked. Radiation or chemotherapy are not first line for this type, especially in a child her age, the surgeon explained. Surgery is the definitive treatment. Ava fiddled with Mr. Buttons during the call, but her eyes never left the screen. When the surgeon finished, she asked in a small but steady voice, "Will I still be able to draw after?" The surgeon smiled gently. That is our goal. To protect who you are, not just take out what doesn't belong. Lily wiped her eyes quickly. Andrew's chest ached at the sight. After the call, Ms. Harper returned with more paperwork. We've tentatively scheduled surgery, she said. If finances remain unresolved, it may still proceed as emergency care, but recovery support, rehab, therapy needs coverage. Lily straightened her shoulders. I'll sign what I need to, but I will not take handouts. If he, she nodded toward Andrew, is helping, it's because he's arranging calls, not paying my debts. Andrew respected her more in that moment than he had respected many men across boardroom tables. Then I'll keep arranging, he said. And when Ava's ready for rehab, we'll make sure the right therapists are waiting. That night in the hospital room, Ava drifted to sleep with monitors softly pulsing. Lily sat at her bedside, forehead resting on her daughter's hand. Andrew stood in the shadows, watching mother and child breathe in tandem. The battle ahead was enormous. A craniotomy, ICU nights, a financial cliff no one should face alone. But there was also clarity, clear scans, clear options, clear steps. For the first time in years, Andrew felt a plan that mattered more than quarterly forecasts. A plan measured not in profit margins, but in the chance for a 6-year-old girl to keep coloring in purple. And though Lily refused his money, she hadn't refused his presence. That was enough, for now. The following morning dawned brighter over Seattle, but inside the hospital corridors, the light felt clinical, sharp, filtered through sterile glass. For Lily Brooks, time had lost its rhythm. Nights and days blurred together, measured only by the beeping monitors beside Ava's bed. Andrew had spent the night in a chair just outside the room. He hadn't meant to stay, but when he had tried to leave, Ava had stirred and whispered, "Don't go." That was enough to anchor him. By breakfast, the floor buzzed with the familiar hum of a children's hospital, carts rolling, nurses exchanging shift reports, the low murmur of anxious families. Andrew bought coffee for Lily from the downstairs cafe, setting it quietly on the tray table. She thanked him without looking up, eyes fixed on Ava as the child colored stars across the corner of her medical chart paper. It was in that moment, quiet, almost mundane, that the storm arrived. At first, it came as a ping on Andrew's phone. A notification from a news site he normally ignored. Tech CEO spotted in pediatric hospital wing with woman child. He frowned, opening it. A grainy photo filled the screen. Him in the hospital lobby, his coat over his arm, Lily beside him, Ava clutching Mr. Buttons. The caption was cruel in its vagueness. PR stunt or secret family? By mid-morning, the whispers spread through the ward. 2 nurses at the desk glanced at him, then back to their monitor screens. A parent down the hall whispered too loudly, "Isn't that the Carter guy? The software one?" Andrew's chest tightened. He had built a career on control, of markets, of boardrooms, of his image. But here, in this fragile space, control had shattered with the click of a shutter. The worst came when Lily saw it. A cousin of hers in Spokane sent a message. "What is this about you and some CEO? Why is Ava's name in comments?" Lily stormed into the hallway, phone trembling in her hand. "You knew this would happen," she hissed at Andrew. "This is why you shouldn't be here. My daughter is not your story." Andrew stood, stunned. "I didn't call anyone. I didn't want this." Then how did a picture from inside this hospital get out? Her voice was sharp enough to draw stares. They put her face online. They're talking about her like she's a headline. Do you understand what that does to a 6-year-old who just learned the word tumor? Andrew's pulse raced. He had weathered hostile press before, mergers gone wrong, shareholder revolts. But this was different. This was personal, human, fragile. I'll fix it, he said quickly. You can't fix the internet, Lily shot back. You can't buy back privacy once it's stolen. Ava's voice drifted from the room. Mommy? Lily swallowed her fury, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and returned inside. Andrew was left in the hall, guilt pressing heavier than any corporate failure. By noon, the hospital's compliance office had called him in. A stern administrator, Mr. Klein, sat across the table, flanked by a lawyer from the hospital's legal department. Mr. Carter, we're investigating a possible HIPAA violation, Klein said. Protected health information appears to have been disclosed without authorization. The photo circulating online shows a pediatric patient identifiable by face and context. This is a breach. I didn't leak anything, Andrew said firmly. I wouldn't. We're not accusing you, Klein clarified. We suspect an internal staff member took the photo. Regardless, under federal law, we must conduct a breach notification process. That means contacting the family, the Department of Health and Human Services, and potentially issuing a public statement. Andrew's jaw tightened. Then find the person. This isn't gossip. It's a child's dignity. The lawyer nodded. We're reviewing security footage, staff logins, and device use. Until then, we advise you to limit your presence in the ward. Attention complicates patient care. Andrew left the office burning with frustration. To be told to step back, when stepping forward was the only thing he wanted, felt like being cut from his own story. That evening, Lily confronted him again. Her eyes were red, not just from tears, but from sleeplessness. They called me in, she said flatly. Compliance. They told me about the breach notification, about investigations, about forms I have to sign to confirm I was notified. Do you understand how humiliating that is? That my daughter's life is a file in someone's inbox now? Andrew kept his voice low. I'm sorry, more sorry than I can say. I've already spoken to attorneys. I'll push for accountability. I don't need your attorneys, Lily snapped. I need peace for my child, and you're not helping. The words landed like blows. For a moment, Andrew nearly walked away. He had been rejected before, but never like this. Never when all he wanted was to protect. Then he remembered the near fall at Pike Place, the scarf around Ava's shoulders, her whisper. This seat is taken. I can't undo the photo, he said quietly. But I can make sure whoever betrayed her privacy never does it again. Not to her, not to anyone. Lily's lips pressed together. She didn't answer. That night, alone in his car, Andrew drafted an email, not to the press, not to shareholders, but to the hospital board. He demanded a full internal compliance investigation. He cited HIPAA statutes, breach notification rule, and hospital policy on staff conduct. But this wasn't a CEO flexing influence. It was a man wielding the only tools he knew to fight for a little girl's right to be more than a headline. The media storm swelled. Comment sections buzzed. Is Carter trying to play hero? PR stunt for his company. What's the story with the waitress and the kid? Andrew ignored it all. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't post statements. He refused to feed the spectacle. Instead, he focused on the next morning's tumor board meeting, where surgeons, oncologists, radiologists, and anesthesiologists would decide the safest path for Ava. He couldn't stop the world from gossiping, but he could sit in the same chair and prove to Lily that his seat wasn't taken by vanity, but by loyalty. That night, in the dim glow of Ava's hospital room, the storm of media felt far away. Ava was asleep, Mr. Buttons tucked beside her. Lily sat reading by the bedside lamp, the lines on her face softened in exhaustion. Andrew stood at the doorway, uncertain if he was welcome. But then Ava stirred in her sleep and murmured, "Seat," her hand brushing the empty chair. Lily looked up, eyes tired but gentler now. "You can sit," she whispered. Andrew did. And for the first time that day, silence was not an enemy, but a balm. The following day, the hospital convened what it called a tumor board, a multidisciplinary meeting where specialists sat around a long oak table, the walls lined with radiographs and monitors. It was clinical democracy at work. Neurosurgeons, pediatric oncologists, radiologists, anesthesiologists, and rehabilitation specialists all gathered to debate a single child's future. Lily sat at the far end, her posture tense but resolute. Beside her sat Andrew, invited as a support person, though he knew his role was silent witness. The room hummed with jargon, charts projected in grayscale, bullet points about risk and probability. For Lily, it was a battlefield of words she had never expected to learn. Dr. Green, the neurosurgery fellow from the ED, began. 6-year-old female, posterior fossa mass. MRI suggests pilocytic astrocytoma, midline, obstructing the fourth ventricle. Hydrocephalus present but currently stable with steroids. Options: proceed to suboccipital craniotomy here, or transfer to a tertiary center with more experience in endoscope-assisted microsurgery. The radiologist clicked through slides. Note the tumor margins. Some adherence to the brainstem is likely. GTR, gross total resection, possible but carries risk. Subtotal resection may be safer, but recurrence risk increases. The oncologist added, if subtotal, surveillance MRIs every 3 months. Radiation would be deferred given age. Chemotherapy only if progression. Lily clenched her hands. English, please. Dr. Green softened his tone. If we take the whole tumor, the surgery is riskier, but the chance of cure is higher. If we take part of it, surgery is safer, but there's a chance it could grow back. And Boston? Lily asked. The room shifted. One of the senior neurosurgeons, Dr. Reynolds, leaned forward. Boston Children's has pioneered endoscope-assisted resections in posterior fossa tumors. Their team is highly experienced with minimizing damage to cerebellar tissue, which reduces the chance of posterior fossa syndrome, a complication where a child may lose speech or coordination temporarily. Lily absorbed every word. She wasn't a doctor, but she was Ava's mother, and that gave her the right to stand at this table with the same authority. Andrew glanced at her. He could see the weight pressing on her, numbers, risks, percentages, but also something deeper, the impossible responsibility of choosing which battlefield her daughter would fight on. After the meeting, Lily walked quickly down the hall, Andrew struggling to keep pace. They want me to decide between risk here or risk there, she said bitterly. Between cutting now or cutting later. Between one set of strangers or another. They're not strangers, Andrew offered. They're experts. Any parent would be lost in this. She stopped abruptly. But I'm not any parent. I'm her parent. If something goes wrong, if she wakes up and can't speak, if she never draws again, there won't be a headline about that. It'll just be me and her, living with the choice I made. Andrew said nothing. There was nothing to say that didn't trespass on her dignity. That evening, back in Ava's room, Lily sat by the window while her daughter slept. Andrew remained by the chair, the same chair Ava had once claimed at Pike Place. Silence filled the space until Lily broke it. Do you know what it feels like, she asked, to have people with more degrees than you'll ever have tell you, Here are two doors. One might hurt less, but it won't cure. The other might cure, but it might break her on the way. And then they hand you the keys? Andrew swallowed. When my wife was sick, I sat in rooms like that. Different illness, different words. But yes, I know. Lily turned to him, eyes sharp. And what did you do? I asked her, Andrew said quietly. I asked what she wanted, and then I stood by it. Lily looked back at Ava, who stirred and whispered in her sleep. She's 6. She can't choose. No, Andrew agreed, but you can. And whatever you choose, it won't be wrong. It will be the choice of a mother who loves her child more than her own fear. The next morning, Lily was invited to sign the consent forms for surgery in Seattle. She stared at the line where her name would go, the black ink heavy as stone. Dr. Reynolds noticed her hesitation. You don't have to decide today. We can manage hydrocephalus temporarily with an EVD or a VP shunt, but surgery is inevitable. Lily asked the question that had burned all night. If she were your daughter, would you keep her here or take her to Boston? The surgeon paused, a rare crack in clinical armor. Boston has more volume in posterior fossa cases. If distance and cost were no issue, I'd consider it. Lily exhaled, as if finally hearing someone admit what she already knew. In the cafeteria later, she sat across from Andrew, untouched coffee cooling between them. You could pay for Boston, she said bluntly. Yes, Andrew admitted. But if I let you, then every article about Ava will say we survived because of your money. Not because I fought for her, not because she fought, because a rich man stepped in. Andrew leaned forward. Then let it be known that you chose. Not me, not the press. You. If you want Boston, I'll arrange logistics, not headlines. No one has to know. Lily studied him, suspicion warring with exhaustion. Why are you doing this? Because a little girl asked me if a seat was taken, Andrew said simply, and I realized I didn't want to live in a world where her chair could be empty. For a long time, Lily said nothing. Then, finally, she whispered, I'll think about Boston. That night, Ava's headaches worsened. She woke, crying, clutching her skull, vomiting again. Nurses rushed in, checked vitals, paged neurosurgery. Dr. Green ordered a repeat neuro exam, whispering about intracranial pressure. Andrew stood back as Lily held her daughter's trembling hand. The fear in her eyes had changed, not just fear of losing Ava's ticket, but fear of making the wrong choice. When the room finally quieted, when Ava drifted back to sleep with the help of medication, Andrew stepped closer. You don't have to carry this alone, he said softly. Yes, I do, Lily replied. Her voice was firm, but tears betrayed her. Because when she's awake, she'll look for me first. Not you. Not anyone else. Me. Andrew bowed his head. He couldn't argue. It was the unshakable truth of motherhood. The next morning, Lily met Dr. Reynolds again. She asked for transfer paperwork to Boston Children's Hospital. Andrew watched her sign the request with a trembling hand. When she finished, she looked at him. I don't know if this is the right choice, but it's mine. And if she wakes up whole, it'll be because I put her where she had the best chance. Andrew nodded. Then we go to Boston. Seattle's dawn was a slate of mist and low clouds, as if the city itself understood the weight of departures. Lily Brooks stood in Ava's hospital room, stuffing a handful of essentials into a worn canvas bag, 2 sets of pajamas, Ava's sketchbook, a toothbrush with fading bristles, and of course, Mr. Buttons the rabbit. Ava, pale but spirited, clutched the stuffed animal to her chest. Are we going on a trip, Mommy? Yes. Sweetheart, Lily said, forcing brightness into her tone. We're going to Boston. Some very smart doctors there will help you feel better. Andrew leaned against the doorway, his phone buzzing every few minutes with texts from his COO in Seattle. He ignored them. His company could survive a few days without him. What mattered now was the fragile girl gripping her rabbit as if it were an anchor. The transfer was coordinated with precision. A case manager arranged a medical flight, a small jet outfitted with monitors, oxygen, and a pediatric critical care nurse. The cost was staggering, tens of thousands of dollars, but Andrew quietly covered it through a corporate health grant, his name nowhere on the paperwork. When Lily realized, she confronted him. You said no money. This isn't money in your pocket, Andrew explained. It's logistics. Without the flight, the transfer takes too long. If pressure spikes, Ava doesn't make it. This isn't charity. It's triage. Lily's jaw tightened. She hated needing help, but she hated risking her daughter's life more. Fine, but don't expect me to say thank you. Andrew only nodded. Respecting her dignity was more important than gratitude. The jet lifted from SeaTac as Seattle's skyline fell away beneath clouds. Ava lay strapped to a stretcher, IV in her arm, monitors beeping softly. Lily sat beside her, one hand on her daughter's knee. Andrew took the seat behind, close enough to be present, far enough not to intrude. Midway over the Rockies, Ava stirred. Mommy, my head feels like drums. The nurse checked her vitals quickly. Pressure's building a bit, she said. We'll monitor closely. If it gets worse, we'll have Boston's team place an EVD right away. Andrew watched the numbers on the monitor spike and settle, his chest clenching with each fluctuation. For all his wealth, he had never felt so powerless. Landing in Boston, the city greeted them with a brittle winter sun. At Boston Children's Hospital, the team was ready. Neurosurgeons, anesthesiologists, PICU nurses. Their confidence radiated through crisp white coats and efficient movements. Dr. Chang, the attending neurosurgeon, introduced herself. We've reviewed the imaging. Our plan is endoscope-assisted microsurgery via suboccipital craniotomy. The goal is gross total resection, but we'll prioritize preserving cerebellar and brainstem function. We'll use intraoperative neuromonitoring, SSEP, MEP, BEP, to safeguard pathways. Lily tried to follow, nodding, eyes wide. Andrew translated softly. They'll use scopes and monitors to make sure they're not hurting important nerves. Dr. Chang added, Given her symptoms, we recommend placing an external ventricular drain first to relieve pressure. It's a temporary tube to drain cerebrospinal fluid. Once stable, we proceed with tumor resection. The words felt heavy, but also clear. Steps, a ladder to climb, one rung at a time. That night, Lily and Ava were offered a room at the Ronald McDonald House near the hospital. The building was warm, filled with donated quilts and the smell of soup from a communal kitchen. Families with children battling cancer, heart defects, rare syndromes, each face reflected the same weary hope. This feels less alone, Lily whispered as they settled in. Andrew stood at the threshold, uncertain if he belonged in this world of parents and plastic name badges. I'll get a hotel nearby, he said, but Ava piped up from the bed. No, stay here. Mr. Button says you should. Lily frowned. They only allow family. The house manager, overhearing, smiled gently. We make exceptions sometimes, especially when a child insists. And so Andrew stayed, not in the same room, but down the hall, in a bed too short for his frame. For the first time in years, he slept without the hum of city noise or the glow of a penthouse skyline. 2 days later, the crisis came. At dawn, Ava woke crying, clutching her head. Her balance faltered as she tried to sit. Lily hit the call button, panic sharp in her voice. Nurses rushed in, checked vitals, paged neurosurgery. "She needs an EVD placed immediately," a resident said. "Pressure's too high." They wheeled her to the procedure room. Lily followed, trembling, signing informed consent with a hand that barely held the pen. Andrew stood behind her, steady as a wall. "You don't have to do this alone," he whispered. "Yes, I do," Lily answered, voice breaking. "But thank you for standing here anyway." The procedure was swift. A small incision, a catheter tunneled into the ventricle, clear cerebrospinal fluid draining into a collection bag. Almost instantly, Ava's breathing eased. The nurse reassured Lily, "She'll feel relief now. Tomorrow, we'll go for the tumor." Lily collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Andrew sat beside her but didn't touch her. He knew this was a grief too sacred to interrupt. After a long silence, Lily whispered, "I signed her life away with that pen. If she doesn't wake up tomorrow, it'll be because I said yes." Andrew turned to her. "No. If she wakes up tomorrow, it will be because you said yes. Don't forget that." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Later that night, the hospital quieted. Ava slept with the EVD secured, her head bandaged, her chest rising steadily. Lily sat on one side of the bed, Andrew on the other. Ava stirred, eyelids fluttering. "Mommy? I'm here." She turned her gaze weakly to Andrew. "You too?" "I'm here," he said. "Good." She closed her eyes again. Mr. Buttons clutched tightly. In the silence that followed, Lily finally allowed one tear to fall. It traced her cheek and dropped onto her daughter's blanket. Andrew wanted to promise outcomes, but he knew better. All he could promise was presence, and sometimes presence was the only shield against despair. Tomorrow, Ava would face 6 hours under the bright lights of the operating room. Tomorrow, Lily's signature on a consent form would transform into scalpels, sutures, and prayers whispered under surgical masks. But tonight, they had this: a drained ventricle, a calmer breath, and the fragile courage of a family reassembled from strangers. Morning in Boston carried a peculiar silence. Snow dusted the streets outside Longwood Avenue, muffling the city's usual noise. Inside Boston Children's Hospital, however, the air throbbed with anticipation. Operating rooms flickered with sterile light, instruments arranged with reverent precision, monitors glowing like sentinels in the half-dark. Ava Brooks, 6 years old, lay small in the middle of this universe. A surgical cap swallowed her curls. Her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Buttons, had been given a matching paper cap by a kind nurse. Lily bent low to whisper, "You're brave. Purple brave." Ava's lips curved faintly. Then the anesthesiologist lowered the mask, and sleep carried her away. For Lily, the moment her daughter's eyelids fluttered shut felt like watching a door close between them. She clutched Andrew's arm so hard he almost winced. "What if she doesn't—" Her voice broke. Andrew steadied her. "Then we'll fight for every second we can. But she's in the best hands." Hands that would soon hold her brain's most delicate threads. Inside or 12, the atmosphere shifted from parental goodbyes to surgical ritual. Dr. Chang, lead neurosurgeon, stood at the head of the table. Her team assembled, a fellow adjusting the neuronavigation system, a scrub nurse arranging the ultrasonic aspirator, the anesthesiologist monitoring vitals, and technicians ready for neuromonitoring. "Confirming patient," Dr. Chang said, voice calm. 6-year-old female, pilocytic astrocytoma, posterior fossa. Goal: gross total resection if safely possible. A chorus of confirmed echoed, an incision traced across the small scalp. The team worked with reverence, layer by layer, skin, muscle, bone. The suboccipital craniotomy exposed the tumor's domain. Open dura, Dr. Chang instructed. The thin membrane parted, revealing tissue pale and pulsating under microscope light. Neuronavigation mapped the tumor's boundaries against MRI scans. Monitors flickered with SSEEP and MEP readouts, constant guardians of motor and sensory pathways. BAEPs tracked auditory signals. Every beep was a prayer that the child's future self, her drawings, her laughter, remained intact. In the waiting room, hours warped. Lily sat with her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup gone cold. Andrew sat beside her, silent but solid. Families came and went, called by surgeons with news, sometimes relief, sometimes grief. Every time a door opened, Lily's breath caught. "She was just coloring yesterday," she whispered. "How can anyone justify cutting into a 6-year-old's head?" Andrew wanted to answer, but truth had only one shape. Because it's the only way to let her keep coloring tomorrow. Back in the OR, the ultrasonic aspirator hummed, emulsifying tumor tissue without damaging nearby structures. The microscope magnified the battlefield, tumor margins clinging stubbornly to the brainstem. "Careful," Dr. Chang murmured. "We're close to cranial nerves 9 and X." Suddenly, alarms chirped. Neuromonitoring signals dipped. MEPs fluctuating. BAEP waveforms blurring. "Pause resection," Dr. Chang ordered. The room froze. "Check blood pressure. Check anesthetics. Adjust retractors." The anesthesiologist spoke quickly. "Stable vitals. This is surgical." Dr. Chang's brow furrowed. "We've hit a vascular pocket. Suction. Gel foam. Keep the field clear." For 30 tense seconds, the room moved as one organism, addressing the small cerebellar bleed. Suction cleared the view, bipolar cautery stemmed the ooze. Gradually, the monitoring signals steadied. A collective breath released. "Crisis averted," Dr. Chang said. "Let's proceed cautiously." In the waiting room, Lily felt her chest seize without knowing why. She gripped Andrew's hand. For once, she didn't push him away. "She's fighting," Andrew whispered, though he couldn't know. Somehow he believed it. 4 hours in, most of the tumor had been removed. Its gelatinous tissue yielded to aspiration, leaving behind only a rim plastered against brainstem fibers. "Do we chase this?" the fellow asked. Dr. Chang hesitated. Gross total resection promised cure but risked permanent deficits. Subtotal meant safer exit but possible recurrence. She remembered Lily's face in consent conference. "If she never draws again, it'll be because I signed the wrong form." Dr. Chang's decision cut through the hum. "We'll stop here. This margin is inseparable without harm. Call it near total. Future MRIs will guide us." The fellow nodded. Instruments retracted, dura closed, bone flap replaced, skin sutured delicately. 6 hours after the first incision, the room quieted. A small body lay under blankets, lines snaking to monitors that now hummed steadily. "She tolerated well," Dr. Chang announced. "Minimal blood loss, no catastrophic deficits noted. Transfer to PICU for monitoring." When Dr. Chang entered the waiting room, Lily stood before she spoke. "The tumor was almost entirely removed," Dr. Chang explained gently. "A small part was left where it was unsafe to dissect further. Prognosis remains excellent. She's stable in recovery. Risks of posterior fossa syndrome remain. We'll monitor for speech or motor difficulties. But for now, she is safe." Lily's knees nearly buckled. Andrew caught her arm, steadying her. Tears broke free, unrestrained. "Can I see her?" she asked. "In a few minutes," Dr. Chang said. "She'll be drowsy, intubated until she breathes strongly. But yes, you'll see her." PICU was a symphony of soft alarms and whispered orders. Ava lay pale under blankets, a breathing tube in place, her head bandaged. To Lily, she looked impossibly small against the expanse of machines. "You did it, baby," Lily whispered, stroking her daughter's hand. "You fought." Andrew stood behind, unwilling to intrude on the sacred circle of mother and child. Yet when Ava's fingers twitched against Lily's, he felt something in his chest ease for the first time in years. That night, as snow thickened outside, Lily and Andrew sat side by side in the PICU waiting alcove. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of relief, exhaustion, and a fragile hope. Finally, Lily turned to him. "She's still here." Andrew nodded. "Yes, she's still here." And for the first time since Pike Place, the seat across from him in his mind no longer felt like a reminder of loss. It felt like a promise. Morning sunlight seeped through the tall windows of the Boston Children's PICU, pale and hesitant, as though it, too, was afraid of disturbing the fragile recovery happening in the ward. For 2 nights, the machines around Ava Brooks had hummed and beeped, each sound a lifeline, each number on the monitor a promise that her body was still fighting. Now it was the 3rd day after surgery. Nurses moved quietly, adjusting IV drips, checking the EVD site for any sign of infection, monitoring intracranial pressure values on the screen. Ava's head was swathed in fresh bandages, her small chest rising steadily under the weight of sedatives that were finally beginning to lift. Lily sat at her daughter's bedside, dark circles beneath her eyes, her hand wrapped around Ava's wrist. Andrew occupied the same chair he had claimed since the first hour of surgery, his suit jacket folded neatly on the armrest, his tie abandoned. "She should be awake more now," the attending nurse whispered. "We're tapering the dexamethasone to reduce swelling. Don't be alarmed if she's quiet. Sometimes children don't speak right away after this kind of surgery." Lily's heart clenched. She turned to Andrew. "Quiet? What does that mean?" "Posterior fossa syndrome," Andrew answered gently, remembering the words the surgeon had used. "Temporary mutism. Sometimes days, sometimes weeks. But most children recover with therapy." Lily nodded, though fear shimmered in her eyes. "What if she doesn't recover?" Andrew didn't lie. "Then she learns to speak again. Different paths. Same child." That afternoon, Ava stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, searching the ceiling with the fog of sedation. Lily leaned forward instantly. "Baby, it's Mommy. I'm here." Ava blinked slowly, lips parting as though to answer, but no sound came. Only a faint breath escaped, as if the bridge between thought and voice had been washed away. Lily's throat tightened. She pressed her forehead to Ava's hand, whispering, "It's okay. You don't have to talk yet. You're safe." Andrew felt the ache ripple through him. He remembered when his wife lost her voice to the ventilator in her final weeks. The silence then had been unbearable. But Ava's silence was different. It was not an ending. It was a pause. Therapists arrived the next morning. PT, physical therapy, OT, occupational therapy, and SLP, speech-language pathology. A swallow study was ordered before she could sip even a drop of water. The PT helped Ava sit at the edge of the bed, supporting her tiny frame as she swayed. "We'll start small," the therapist said. "Legs on the ground, feel the floor." Ava's feet dangled, but she tried, determination etched across her pale face. She reached for Mr. Buttons, and the OT placed the rabbit in her lap, encouraging her to squeeze. to practice grip strength. When the SLP showed her picture cards, sun, moon, chair, Ava pointed slowly, her eyes sharp. She understood. Her brain still held language. It was her mouth that refused. "She's with us," the therapist assured Lily. "The words are inside. We just have to help them come out again." That evening, Lily sat in the quiet room, tracing her daughter's forehead. "She looks at me like she wants to say something, and I can't hear her." Andrew leaned closer. "Then listen differently. Look at her eyes, her hands. Speech is more than sound." Lily considered him, surprised. "You sound like you've done this before." Andrew's jaw tightened. "When my wife was sick, she couldn't speak near the end. I learned to read her smallest gestures. A squeeze of my hand meant yes. 2 squeezes meant no. Sometimes it was enough." Lily's expression softened. "You really stayed?" "Yes," Andrew said simply. "I stayed." On the 3rd night, as monitors cast soft blue light, Ava stirred again. She looked at Andrew, then at her mother, then at the chair beside the bed, the same kind of chair she had once claimed at Pike Place Market. Her lips moved. At first, nothing came. Then, with a raspy effort, a single word slipped into the quiet. "Seat." Lily froze. Tears spilled down her face. "Yes, baby, the seat. It's still yours." Andrew felt his throat close. Of all the words Ava might have spoken first, she chose the one that tied them back to their beginning, to the rainy cafe where a simple question had rewritten all their lives. The nurse, overhearing, smiled softly. "Speech returning. That's a good sign." The next morning, a new MRI was performed to check for residual tumor. The images, projected in grayscale, showed an empty cavity where the mass had once pressed against vital structures. No visible regrowth, no abnormal enhancement. Dr. Chang delivered the news. "We see no residual tumor on immediate post-op scan. We'll repeat MRIs in 3 months, 6 months, then yearly. Prognosis remains excellent." Lily pressed her hands to her face, sobbing into her palms. Relief, raw and overwhelming, poured out. Andrew stood quietly, letting her have the moment. He had no right to intrude on the sacred relief of a mother hearing her child was safe. But inside he felt something almost forgotten. Hope, sharp and clear. Rehabilitation continued. Ava walked a few steps with the PT, her gait wobbly but determined. She stacked blocks with the OT, pointed to cards with the SLP. Each effort drained her, but each was a victory. By evening, she whispered again, a little stronger. "Seat, Mommy." Lily laughed through her tears. "Yes, baby. Mommy's seat is right here." She looked at Andrew then, her gaze no longer sharp with suspicion. "And yours, too," she whispered. Andrew sat down, finally daring to rest. For the first time in years, he felt not like an outsider hovering at the edge of grief, but like someone who had a place, a seat, that belonged to him. That night, as Boston snow fell softly against hospital windows, the 3 of them formed a quiet circle around the hospital bed. Mother, daughter, and the man who had chosen not to leave. The world outside still spun with deadlines and headlines, but here, in this fragile room, healing had begun. Not just of a brain freed from pressure, but of hearts learning to speak again. Spring came late to Seattle that year, as though the city itself had waited for Ava Brooks to return. The cherry blossoms along Lake Washington bloomed timidly, pale pink against a still gray sky, and the rain seemed softer than usual, as if even the clouds had learned mercy. It had been 6 weeks since Ava's surgery in Boston. The stitches were gone, the EVD scar fading beneath her hairline, the MRI scans still clean. She walked more steadily now, though therapy continued. Her speech was halting but improving, each word a triumph. And though Lily still woke some nights with fear clamped in her chest, she now woke to find her daughter breathing, drawing, laughing softly at cartoons. Andrew Carter had returned to his glass tower headquarters, but something fundamental had shifted. The CEO who once measured life in profit margins now measured it in children's footsteps echoing through hospital hallways. His board noticed, the press noticed, but Andrew ignored them. The only eyes he cared about were Ava's when she asked, "Will you be there today?" It began with an idea whispered in a quiet hospital corridor in Boston. There should be help for families like us. Lily had said it, not Andrew. She had looked at the Ronald McDonald House staff, the financial counselors, the therapists, and realized how thin the safety net truly was. Too many parents slipped through the cracks of Medicaid transitions, charity care applications, or insurance denials. Andrew had carried those words home like a commandment. And so, 1 month later, in a renovated brick building near Pike Place Market, the doors opened to the Second Seat Foundation. The name puzzled reporters at first, but when Andrew explained how a little girl had asked if a chair was taken, how that question had begun everything, they understood. "The idea is simple," Andrew told the small crowd on opening day. "Every table should have a second seat, one more place for someone who doesn't know where to go. We provide grants to cover out-of-pocket expenses insurance won't touch: travel, lodging, meals, childcare for siblings. We fund legal aid for families fighting breaches of privacy. And we train staff on HIPAA compliance, so no child becomes a headline again." Lily stood beside him, not as a silent figure, but as co-founder. She had insisted. "This isn't just his money," she said to the press. "It's our story. Ava's story. And now it belongs to other families too." Behind them, Ava sat on a small stage chair, Mr. Buttons in her lap. She wore a lavender dress and a shy smile. When the ribbon was cut, she whispered into the microphone, voice soft but audible, "This seat is for us." The crowd erupted. In the weeks that followed, families came. A father from Yakima, whose son needed a bone marrow transplant. A single mother from Spokane balancing 2 jobs while her daughter awaited open-heart surgery. A grandmother raising twins while applying for Medicaid after their parents disappeared. Each one walked into the foundation's office expecting paperwork and red tape. Instead, they found couches, warm coffee, volunteers who listened before asking for documents. They found Lily, sleeves rolled up, guiding them through forms she herself had once cried over. They found Andrew in the back office, not in a suit but in rolled-up shirt sleeves, signing grants without hesitation. "You don't even ask for repayment?" one mother asked, stunned. Andrew shook his head. "Hope isn't a loan, it's a gift." The media returned, hungry for a redemption story. The same outlets that had once smeared him for PR stunts now wrote glowing profiles. CEO turns personal tragedy into family lifeline. But Andrew didn't grant interviews. He let Lily speak. She told the story of consent forms and sleepless nights, of the indignity of being reduced to a file, of a little girl who had whispered one word after surgery. She said, "Seat," Lily told them. And we decided no family should sit alone again. On a warm afternoon in June, the foundation hosted its first fundraiser dinner. The venue wasn't a luxury hotel ballroom, but a modest community center decorated with paper lanterns made by patients. On one wall hung drawings by children, rainbows, rockets, and one carefully penciled chair with the caption, "Always one more seat." As speeches ended, Andrew surprised the crowd. He turned not to the donors but to Lily, in front of everyone. "I built towers in this city," he said, voice low but carrying. "But none of them taught me what a 6-year-old did with a question in a cafe. I don't want to build alone anymore." He knelt slightly, awkwardly, for a man unused to ceremony, and held out a simple silver ring. "Lily Brooks, will you marry me?" The room gasped. Lily froze, eyes wide. For a heartbeat, it seemed too much, too public, too soon. But then she looked at Ava, who beamed, clutching Mr. Buttons, whispering, "Say yes, Mommy." And Lily whispered it. "Yes." Applause thundered, not just for romance, but for survival, for dignity reclaimed, for a family that had rebuilt itself from shards. That night, after the hall emptied, Andrew sat with Lily and Ava at a small table. No cameras, no crowd, just 3 chairs pulled close together. "This feels different," Lily admitted. "Not charity, not pity. A choice. Our choice." Andrew nodded. "Exactly that." Ava leaned against him, eyes heavy with sleep. "You'll always save me a seat?" "Always," Andrew promised. Weeks later, the Foundation's office displayed its first plaque. In the first month, 23 families supported. In the first year, many more to come. And beneath it, a single wooden chair sat in the lobby, empty by design. A sign hung above it. "Reserved for whoever needs it most today." Children sat there. Parents sat there. Once even Andrew sat there quietly, remembering the girl who had asked him the simplest question of his life. The calendar said spring again, but for Lily Brooks, time would forever be measured differently, before surgery and after surgery. 1 year after the 6-hour ordeal that had nearly broken her heart, Lily walked hand in hand with Ava through the familiar glass doors of Seattle Children's Hospital. This time, the air smelled less of antiseptic fear and more of routine checkup nerves. Andrew followed close behind, no longer hovering on the margins. He was family now. No headlines needed. Ava skipped slightly, her balance nearly perfect, her curls bouncing beneath a purple headband. In her free hand, she clutched Mr. Buttons, who wore a new ribbon around one ear. "Do you think the MRI will hurt today, Mommy?" she asked. "Not at all," Lily reassured. "Just a picture. Remember? The machine is noisy, like a robot playing drums." "And robots don't get scared," Ava recited, smiling. Andrew's chest warmed. She had repeated the same line a year ago, before anesthesia took her under. Now she said it with laughter. The day stretched across corridors, nurses, and the hum of MRI scanners. When the neuroradiologist finally returned with the report, Lily's hands shook. "No recurrence," he said. "Clean scan. 1 year post-op, no evidence of disease. We'll continue annual monitoring, but for now, she is tumor-free." The words landed like sunlight breaking storm clouds. Lily wept openly, relief dissolving the stone that had pressed against her chest for 12 long months. Andrew wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steady but quiet. This was Lily's moment to exhale, finally, fully. Ava tilted her head, puzzled by their tears. "Why are you crying if it's good?" "Because," Andrew whispered, "sometimes joy is too big to fit inside." That evening, the 3 of them returned not to a hospital ward but to the Second Seat Foundation's community room, where families gathered for a modest anniversary celebration. Balloons floated against brick walls, children played with donated toys, and a long table bore drawings taped edge to edge. At the center stood the Foundation's symbol, a small wooden chair with a plaque reading, reserved for hope. Andrew stepped up to the microphone, his voice softer than it had ever been in a boardroom. 1 year ago, a little girl whispered if a seat was taken. Today, that seat belongs not just to her, but to every family here. In our first year, we've supported 97 children through travel, lodging, and therapy. That's 97 stories of courage, 97 seats filled. The crowd applauded, but the moment belonged to Lily, who took the microphone next. "I used to believe dignity meant refusing help," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "But I learned dignity means choosing the help that honors your child." This foundation was born from that choice. And from the bravery of one little girl. She glanced at Ava, who was drawing purple stars on a poster board. Then came the surprise. Ava climbed onto the stage, Mr. Buttons tucked under her arm. She gripped the microphone with both hands and, voice slightly shaky but clear, spoke, "This seat is taken. By me, by Mommy, by Andrew, by everyone who needs it." The room fell silent, then erupted in cheers. Tears blurred Lily's eyes. Andrew's throat tightened until he could hardly breathe. Ava had spoken what they all felt, that survival had turned into legacy, that one child's chair had multiplied into many. Later, as twilight settled over Pike Place Market, the three of them returned to the cafe where it had all begun. They sat at the same table by the rain-streaked window, the air filled with the familiar scent of roasted coffee and salt from the sound. Ava placed Mr. Buttons on the empty chair across from her. "This seat," she said with a grin, "is taken by hope." Andrew reached across the table, taking Lily's hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers through his. The cafe bustled with strangers who would never know the full story. How a widow's loneliness, a waitress's dignity, and a little girl's courage had collided on a rainy morning to rewrite 3 lives. But the echoes would ripple outward, in every family helped by the foundation, in every hospital that remembered to protect privacy, in every therapist who coaxed a child's first word after surgery. 1 year post-op, Ava Brooks was not just tumor-free. She was the keeper of a legacy. Her story was no longer about illness, but about what follows: resilience, dignity, and the truth that healing is never solitary. Healing always needs another seat at the table. Thank you, dear friends, for staying with us until the very end of this story. If Ava's journey and the symbol of the second seat touched your heart, let it be a reminder that hope always has room for one more. If you believe in stories of healing, dignity, and second chances, please subscribe so you won't miss the next journey. Your presence here means more than words can say. With gratitude and hope for you always.